Thank you very much, Chairman. Ambassador, you're very welcome, and I'm sure it's getting tiresome now. You've had so many of us to go through, but I'll try and get through this as quickly as I can. Regarding your relationship, Russia's relationship with Ireland, we would like to think that we would be friendly countries towards one another. There are two issues that continually arise with respect to Russians and Ireland, and that is the ships that are regarded as spy ships off our west coast. Can you tell me, do you actually have spy ships travelling up and down our west coast? And the other one is, as friends, why would your aircraft fly along our west coast with their transponders switched off? Why would that happen? It'd be like me, I live in a housing estate, it'd be like me looking over the wall of a neighbour's house to see what's going on under cover of some sort or other. It's not what one expects from a friend that they would do that. So I'd be interested to hear your comments on that. Now, I accept that there was a lot of media coverage of the Russian exercise in the Atlantic, and I accept that it is not an unusual occurrence. All navies have exercises in the Atlantic, so there's nothing unusual about that. But I think the location was unusual, and I would regard it as a provocative move on Europe more than a provocative move on Ireland, given Ireland's ability or inability, if you want, from a defence point of view. And a lot of people in Ireland would have seen it as a provocative move. Clearly, your response to the fishermen is to be welcomed, and I'm delighted that you decided to move elsewhere. Can you tell us precisely where the exercise is likely to take place now? Is it true that you informed the UK before Ireland was informed that that exercise was to take place? I'd just be interested in that. Now, you talk about your friends in Belarus, and you talk about Russia being a peacekeeping force, a force that, if you want, a people that want the same freedoms as the rest of the world. What steps have you taken to convince the Belarusian authorities that the detention of political prisoners is wrong? And what steps have you taken to try and convince them to release them? I hope I'm not going too fast here for you. You say in your document that states have a right to choose their partners. They have a right to choose their friends. Why does it worry you so much that they choose to be friendly with NATO countries? NATO is not in Ukraine at the moment, so why would that worry you? With respect to the build-up that we're seeing, the aerial photographs, if that's just normal, everyday behaviour for the Russian Federation to have so many troops on the border of Ukraine, are you telling me you have an equal number of troops on the borders with Poland, on the borders with Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia? Because if you have, you must have a massive force entirely. Now, my colleague, Senator Wilson, brought up the issue of Georgia. Ambassador, we have seen photographs on this committee of the area that is now covered by Russia in Georgia. And prior to the occupation, which we believe it is, there were villages there, there was farm buildings there, there was, you know, every sign of people living there. Now it seems to be devoid of all buildings. We're being told, and I'd like you to explain this one, we're being told that there's constant probing on the borders with Georgia right now, that is on the enforced borders. We're being told that farmers and farming families have been separated from their lands, and if they try to get back to their lands, they're being arrested when they cross the border. So you say you're there in a peacekeeping role. Have you stood idly by and quietly by while whoever is in charge has destroyed buildings and razed entire villages to the ground? Are you aware of that taking place? And if you are, who do you blame for it if it's not a Russian takeover of that particular part of the country? I know the last time I spoke to you about Crimea, you gave me a history lesson. Perhaps you'll give a history lesson to the entire committee here about Russia's rights to be in Crimea. And other than that, Ambassador, I really do wish we could see a de-escalation on all sides of what's going on right now, because all it takes is one unforeseen act to drag us all into some sort of a conflict. And my colleagues here talk about neutral Ireland. I talk about militarily non-aligned Ireland. There's a slight difference. But I do not want to see conflict. And it doesn't take a whole lot. I was around in the 1960s when the Cold War was in place, and anything could have happened that time. And in the situation we're in now, anything could happen again. It only takes one person to do something wrong before the next thing you have a war situation on your hands. So thank you for being here, and I hope you can deal with those issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Time is moving on. Just a couple of brief questions from myself before we conclude, and I very much welcome your presence, and was struck by a number of statements in your opening commentary where you stated that you felt that your government saw no reason to invade Ukraine. You yourself, in reply to Deputy Stanton, spoke of the need to de-escalate. And I just have three questions. Firstly, in relation to a domestic matter, I was struck last week by some public commentary of a meeting that took place between yourself and the Chief of Staff of the Irish Defence Forces, and let me say, such meetings are commonplace. Such meeting was labelled as a courtesy call, which again is perfectly normal. But what struck me was a statement following the meeting, and I hope I'm not misquoting anybody, but a statement attributed to the Russian embassy in Dublin, wherein it stated that the meeting discussed the prospects of contacts between the armed forces of Ireland and Russia, and I was just wondering what might those prospects be, and my other questions relate to specifically since our meeting last year, and I don't wish to dwell on a situation in Belarus, and I acknowledge what you have said in terms of the internal affairs of a country, but you have heard from Senator Ardagh and others, the importance of the relationship between Ireland and Belarus. But could I direct you perhaps to the Ryanair flight that was forced down on the 23rd of May last year over Belarus? Wondering if you would have a view on that, and I'm wondering if you would have any information that you might like to share with the committee on the whereabouts of Mr. Protasevich, the young reporter who was taken from the Ryanair flight and about whom we have heard little in recent times. And my final question, which I suppose is the subject matter of our meeting, and it's back to the points raised by Deputy Stanton. If I could ask you, how might matters now be de-escalated, having regard to the highly charged and tense situation within Europe, that the issues, are not just issues pertaining to Ukraine, however important they are. But we're dealing with issues which are central to the future of Europe, as I think you indicated yourself. I read in recent times a fascinating article by Vladimir Putin, dated 12th of July 2021, where he speaks in graphic and indeed comprehensive terms on the historical unity of Russians and Ukrainians. And I'm wondering, in the context of current developments, when he speaks about a family, when he speaks about a spiritual relationship, when he speaks about unity. I mean, it strikes me as being extraordinary that you would amass tens of thousands of troops and heavy artillery and armed equipment of a quite threatening nature along the border directed at members of your family. So I'm wondering maybe if you could just elaborate on the steps that you would see as being appropriate towards a de-escalation, which I think we're all in agreement should take place. You mentioned a list of issues that were presented by your government in December. But I have to say that these requests were actually demands, and that they cannot be met. I'm struck just by a statement of one of your neighbours, the President of Finland, today, and again, Finland, a militarily neutral country like Ireland, but wherein President of Finland has said that the list of demands presented by Russia in December, aim at fundamentally changing the architecture and structures of European security, where he reminded European governments and beyond that nobody can any longer ignore the situation, that the demands of your government are shaking the foundations of European security, and have already been rejected. And in response, perhaps to your commentary that these requests, demands, requirements are still on the table, they're really not going to be met. So I'm wondering how, at the same time, we can advance issues of diplomacy. We didn't get a chance really to talk in any great extent about the Normandy talks, the Normandy format. I believe there is real opportunity there to continue in that guise, and struck by a statement last week on behalf of the Normandy group, wherein it was stated that there will be unconditional observance of a ceasefire, regardless of the differences over issues of the implementation of the Minsk agreement. So are you in a position on behalf of your government to guarantee this committee that unconditional observance as given in Normandy last week in the Normandy format will continue? They haven't met this week, they may meet next week. But by way of concluding comments, if you could indicate how you would see matters being de-escalated, having regard to the fact that everybody in this room believes that is the only way forward. Thank you. Oh, and sorry, before you come back, Ambassador, I might invite Senator O'Donnell, who is with us remotely and who has been very patient. And I'll ask Niall to come in, and then we're back to Ambassador. Neil, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And Chair, thanks for allowing me a very brief opportunity. In deference to you and colleagues, I'll keep it brief, and indeed to the Ambassador too. Ambassador, thanks very much for your engagement and your contributions with our committee here this afternoon. And colleagues have outlined the importance that we place on Ireland's neutrality on the international stage. We also place a great deal of importance and pride in terms of our own process of conflict resolution and moving beyond conflict and the peace process here in Ireland that we have benefited from. And I'm wondering, Ambassador, in the context of all that has been said thus far, if you believe there is a position for Ireland, not least through our place on the UN Security Council at present, play a proactive role in seeking to practically assist that process of de-escalation. I welcome the opportunity to engage with you this evening, and I know colleagues have put a whole range of questions to you, so I don't need to rehearse those. But I'm just wondering if on that point, Ambassador, if you think that there's something that Ireland can do through the UN Security Council to actually utilise our soft diplomatic power internationally, but also utilise our experience in terms of peace building and conflict resolution to actually practically assist in that process of de-escalation. So thanks for allowing me in at the very end, Chair. I appreciate that.
Ambassador, the floor is yours, and thank you.
Okay. Senator, there are no spy ships to the west of Ireland, as far as I know. Maybe they're so spy that nobody knows, but as far as I know, there are none. The transponders off. Well, we have covered that probably a number of times already. The aircraft which normally fly around the airspace, not Irish airspace. There are none military aircraft in the Irish airspace. There is a huge area of air traffic control of Ireland, responsibility of Ireland, in which there are, well, for decades there have been flights by training missions by our military aircraft. That's being done always under strict rules and procedures designed to keep it safe, with no hindrance to whatever. I do not accept your analogy to, peeking into the neighbor. This is nothing to be concerned about. The status of our exercises being seen as provocative for Europe, I don't think so. Again, let me get back to the nature and scale of these exercises which have been planned, that I know, well before this kind of period of tension. And if we were to send any signal to Europe, I don't think that will be the shakedown we are talking about. That could have been done in any other way, but not in this particular way. UK before Ireland, I don't know. There might be some procedure of air traffic control channels. I'm not particularly well aware of that, but you don't have to put much into that. It's just very much technicality. Our friends in Belarus, well, we have been with them throughout the recent period of tension and turmoil. It's a delicate thing. As we all know, many, tempers flare, and sometimes there are overreactions. The way, just look at what happened in Kazakhstan very recently. I wouldn't want this kind of thing in Belarus or elsewhere. You know that they have cut heads off police officers who tried to maintain some semblance of order. So, but we have done what we can do under the circumstances. There have been requests from the government of Kazakhstan to the Organization for Collective Security, which comprises Russia, Kazakhstan, Belarus, Armenia, and Kyrgyzia. We've done, I would say, rather efficiently. Within a matter of 24 hours, there have been sort of a quietening force which assisted in. We've been probably on the verge of that, but there have been no request from the government of Belarus, which is independent, sovereign state as much as Ukraine is, probably even more under the circumstances. So, believe me, we take, there are many friends of ours in Belarus, not only in the government, but elsewhere, and we keep a dialogue very, very close with them. Why bother that NATO is in Ukraine? Well, it is quite clear. It's not, I agree with the chairman. It is not about Ukraine. The whole issue of security, it is not about Ukraine per se. It's just one of the aspects, but it's very, very vivid aspect. If, for example, you'll see some ground-to-ground missile sites of NATO in the vicinity of Dnipropetrovsk or elsewhere, it's just within 500 kilometers range from Moscow. And if you take into account all the posture of NATO, which is decidedly anti-Russian over recent years, and on top of that, the hostility of the Kiev government towards Russia, then this is a recipe for real threat to our national security, which we cannot ignore. And we are trying to achieve result through dialogue and diplomacy for the time being. The president has said that if it fails, then we will have to think about the other measures to safeguard our own security. I would hope it won't come to that. So many troops in the vicinity again. Well, I don't think that there have been any real change, as you might imagine from the press reports, any real change in the military posture in the western region of Russia. Again, this is very striking to me because I see the only photograph republished all over again. And this one is Yelnya. Yelnya is a small town in the Smolensk region. I mean, it's ridiculous. It resembles the ill-famous, well, the late Secretary Powell. I respected him as a gentleman, but he was so much bad in the UN with the with this small vial of some white powder. This is the weapons of mass destruction which Saddam Hussein has. That resembles me of that. This Secretary Powell has been upstaged by intelligence, U.S. intelligence. I would want that the whole story now won't go into the same direction. I see that your information, Senator, on Georgia is somehow resembles some news stories in the Tbilisi newspapers, and it's not necessarily true. I know that you're a man of integrity, but please do take this stuff with a grain of salt at least. No signs of life, probing constantly. There is no military activity there whatsoever on the part of the South Ossetian troops. There is no reason for that, and I hope Georgians understand that as much. As far as Crimea, It really calls for a very long time, Chair. I would suggest we could meet specifically for this subject matter. But in 2 or 3 words, Crimea has always been Russian, and it always be. The only period interruption on that was under the Soviet rule, when nobody cared, when Khrushchev transferred the administrative command over Crimea from Russian Federation to Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. Again, nobody cared. But come 1991, the Crimean people cared, and they wanted, at the breakup of the Soviet Union, to go to Russia, where they belonged. But unfortunately for them, tragically, I would say, nobody listened to them in Moscow. And in Kiev, well, they obviously made every effort to keep it within the newly independent Ukraine. There have been 3 referendums, 3 over decades, all indicating that the will of the people in Crimea is to be with Russia. And in the end, that was the coup in 2014, which provoked the people in Crimea to stand aside. There have been no conflict there, thanks to Russian troops stationed in Crimea all through these years under agreement with Ukrainians. They have been contingent. They essentially played the role of peacekeepers. They just made sure there will be no intervention with the political action by the political parties in Crimea to organize referendum that was legally, absolutely legitimate under the UN Charter. They voted overwhelmingly with no a machine gun at their hands. That was their initiative. That was their long-standing belief and demand and desire. That's it. I don't, well, normally, this is a somewhat very standalone subject. We normally, as diplomats, are not allowed to show any emotion, but I do have relatives in Crimea, and I know how it went through all these years and what jubilation was at that time all over the peninsula, it was like spring. It was actually spring, and they called it Crimean Spring. I don't want any people to insult these good-natured people in Crimea for their choice, really, with all this political, hoopla. Meeting with General Clancy. Well, I think that has been played up in the media in a bad way, which is unfortunate and really unwarranted. I don't want to repeat. There have been enough comments from the defense staff as well as from the Department of Foreign Affairs. This is absolutely normal diplomatic practice. I have asked for the courtesy call with the new chief of staff, and that was back in November, etc. I think that in a general sense, the more dialogue we have bilaterally, the better. Then we understand each other better. And back to your point about military contacts, well, I perhaps think that you recall as a minister that we do have, you have Irish contingent at the Golan Heights between Israel and Syria. And we have had for some time, since we have been invited by the Syrian government, we have our own Russian military police in the area, and they cooperate. They maintain very useful and important contact, and we touched upon that with General Clancy, and we certainly both talked about that should be continued, and it's an important thing. That's what we have in mind, except then there are other things, not really military per se, but we have army games regularly, and some Irish servicemen participate. And last time I know that the boxer from the Irish Defence Forces, he took bronze medal in these games. What's bad about that? I don't know. It's a very good thing to build trust among servicemen. It's just a good thing. De-escalation. You mentioned the article by the president, the unity stuff, and so on. Well, the overall thrust of our position towards Ukraine, and you simply can't find anything pointing to any hostility on our side towards Ukrainians. We are really interested in the stable, peaceful, and, well, hopefully good neighborly country in the face of Ukraine for us. That's for sure. We have seen a lot of manipulation by some Western powers of Ukraine being, stimulating nationalist and even radical nationalism in Ukraine. There is a notion of anti-Russia, so Ukraine being anti-Russia. That's a very unfortunate way of handling it, but I believe that they simply use Ukraine as a tool of maintaining some sort of instability on the Russian border, in that way putting political pressure on Russia. That's at least in our assessment, that's intention of some people in Washington and beyond. Now, I would agree that there have been a slight movement recently when the representatives, the political counselors within the Normandy format met in Paris under the initiative of France, and we welcomed that. We took part in that. It is good. Ceasefire, good. I mean, this is something which Lugansk and Donetsk tried to maintain for years. Well, there is always a chance for shelling. We have supported the idea of disengagement, which physically would prevent this kind of stuff going on. When forces disengage to the point of maybe 30 or 40 kilometers, and it's okay. You can't reach with the artillery fire the other side. That was not the case for many years. We have 13,000 people who died there, and the majority, the major part, is civilian population in the Donetsk and Lugansk regions by shelling from the Ukrainian side. It's a fact. And the OSCE monitors who are there, they attest to that in their reports. Now, as our colleague here inquired about the role of Ireland, I think that there is a distinctive role which can be, and I hope it will be played by Ireland because of the real, the independent, in some way, stuff, the perspectives you have on the international affairs, the principles which we share with you, of the central role of the UN, the peaceful resolution of conflicts, the preference for dialogue instead of guns. The peacekeeping experience Ireland has had. So all that in our mind just combines into, well, force of good. And I would suggest respectfully that Ireland uses this to help right now this very important dialogue which we have started. In what way? Well, I would suggest the obvious way would be to tone down rhetoric. This is extremely important. One thing is that every day you listen to reports and you see this another and another and another statement by Josep Borrell or the UK foreign minister. Tomorrow will be destructive sanctions. We will crush Russia. Well, what point is made by that? Do they want to frighten us? No, they want to frighten us. The only result of this is spoiling atmosphere, and it makes a little bit more difficult to progress, to proceed with the dialogue. That's the only result. So if Ireland, and I see some signs of that in the recent comments by the foreign minister and others, I see that there is a certain movement towards the understanding of the importance of the moment and the political side of things, not exchanging, verbal shouts or whatever, not about guns and munitions, but about getting down to business, to the table and negotiating. We will not be getting public. We will not be getting public with that. We will work hard, but, well, let's keep our fingers crossed.